Story 1. I was never afraid of being home alone, but that night, with both my parents gone on one of their frequent weekend trips, I felt a sense of freedom mixed with the quiet thrill of having the house to myself. It was around midnight, and I was curled up on the couch, lost in a book, with only the soft hum of the refrigerator from the kitchen breaking the silence. That's when I heard it, a faint creak, like the sound of the back door opening slowly. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest, telling myself it was just the wind. But then came the unmistakable sound of footsteps. For a moment, I couldn't move, my mind racing through 1,000 different possibilities. The footsteps grew louder, more deliberate, and a cold wave of fear washed over me. I remember the phone was on the kitchen counter, far too close to the intruder. My only option was my cell phone upstairs. Moving as quiet as I could, I tiptoed upstairs. My every breath felt like it was giving away my presence. Reaching my room, I locked the door behind me and slid underneath my bed. Pulling my phone from the charger, my hands were shaking so badly I could barely dial 911. "Please, you have to help me. Someone is in my house," I whispered into the phone. My voice sounded like I was in fear and desperation. But the dispatcher's calm voice was my lifeline, promising help was on the way, instructing me to stay in line and under the bed. Lying there under the bed, the minutes stretched into what felt like hours. I could hear the intruder moving through the house, the occasional soft thud or the distant sound of drawers being opened, sending spikes of terror through me. I held my breath each time the footsteps approached my room, praying they wouldn't discover my hiding spot. Then, the distant sound of the police cut through the night, growing louder with each heartbeat. The footsteps stopped, then hurried, receding quickly. The dispatcher assured me that the police were entering the house, and I should remain hidden until they had found me. The relief I felt when a familiar voice called out my name, confirming it was safe, was overwhelming. The intruder was gone, scared off by the arriving officers. They hadn't caught him yet, but assured me that they would keep a close watch on my house. My parents rushed home, and that day that followed, we added new locks and a whole security system and discussing emergency plans. That night changed how I viewed the safety of my home. It taught me the importance of being prepared and the strength of quick thinking. Most importantly, it showed me that even in the most terrifying moments where I feel the most vulnerable, I could act to protect myself. Story 2. I've always loved the peace of being home alone by myself, enjoying quiet times, but one rainy evening, everything changed. That night, while watching TV and listening to the comforting sound of rain, I got a scary phone call. The phone rang and I thought it was a friend or maybe a wrong number, but instead I heard a creepy whisper saying, "You shouldn't be alone," and then silence. I saw unknown on the caller ID and tried to think it was just someone's idea of a stupid joke. More calls came in, each one scarier than the last. The person knew what I was wearing, what I was watching, and seemed to see everything I did. That's when I realized this was serious, and somebody was actually watching me. The last call was the worst. The whispers felt like it was coming from right next to me, telling me to look outside. I was so scared, but looked out the window anyway. During a flash of lightning, I saw someone or something standing far away in the garden on the phone. I ran into my room quickly and locked myself in. The phone kept ringing, but I never answered. Then it hit me. The danger wasn't just outside. Those calls weren't coming from somewhere far. They were coming from inside the house. I called the police and they arrived within minutes, but it felt like an eternity. They found the back door unlocked, but no sign of the intruder. The most disturbing discovery, however, was a second phone on the hook in the basement. The caller ID showing my number. Someone had been inside my house, moving silently in the shadows, manipulating my fear. After that, I felt like I'm exposed, and I learned a lot. I became more careful about my security and my personal information. I also learned to trust my feelings more. If I feel like I'm being watched, it might be true. And while I still like being home alone, I now know the importance of staying aware of my surroundings. Story 3. Living alone in a house passed down through generations, I found comfort in its familiar walls and the stories they held. My family's histories was etched in every nook and cranny, or so I thought, until one lazy Sunday afternoon changed everything. I decided to explore the attic. While clearing it out, I found a strange outline behind the old dresser. Moving the dresser revealed a small hidden door I had never noticed before. Driven by curiosity, I opened it and found a hidden room filled with strange items and old diaries. The room felt like stepping into someone's secret space, with shelves full of odd objects and ancient books and diaries. Centered around the desk that looked like it was still in use, despite the dust. It felt like the room wasn't forgotten. Reading those diaries, I learned about a distant relative who was into these weird things. This hidden room was his safe haven for exploring the unknown, filled with notes on his weird experiments and encounters with dangerous spirits. What I found made me uneasy. The details, accounts of scenes, and instructions with spirits in the diaries made the artifacts around the room seem less harmful and more like tools for something dark. After finding the room, the house didn't feel the same. Every noise and shadow felt menacing, and I couldn't shake this feeling of being watched. The comforting solitude I once enjoyed was now a source of anxiety. I debated whether to share the discovery of the room. It connected me to a part of my family's history I hadn't known, but it also felt dangerous. In the end of things, I decided to keep the room hidden, hoping to forget the unease it caused me. This experience showed me that our homes and lives can have hidden aspects, influenced by the past in ways we might not see. Finding the hidden room taught me to respect the unknown and be mindful of the history and mysteries that exist in familiar places. Story 4. I've always been an avid gamer, finding happiness and companionship in the virtual world where I could be anyone, do anything. It was one of these digital realms that I met Alex, or at least that's who he said he was. When it hit off instantly, our online avatars battling side by side, conquering quest after quest, and sharing laughs over voice chat. After months of playing, we decided it was time to finally meet in person. My parents were out of town, leaving me the perfect opportunity to invite Alex over, without the usual parental supervision and concern. I spent days tidying up, nervously anticipating the face-to-face meeting with my online best friend. When the doorbell finally rang, my heart was racing with excitement and a touch of apprehension. However, the person standing on the doorsteps was no teenager like me from the pictures Alex had shared. Instead, he was significantly older, his eyes darting around nervously, not quite meeting mine. Trying to brush off my initial shock, I invited him in, attributing the discrepancy to my nerves. But as the evening proceeded, my discomfort grew. Alex was evasive when I asked about the difference in his appearance and seemed overly interested in the layout of my house and the fact that I was alone. His questions felt intrusive, his demeanor unsettling. The situation escalated when he casually mentioned how easy it had been to find out where I lived and how much he had learned about me online. Panic set in as I realized the gravity of my mistake. I had invited a stranger into my home, someone who had deceived me about his identity and intentions. Feeling tiredness, I suggested it was time for him to leave, but he was reluctant, his earlier anxiousness replaced by a bold, unsettling confidence. My mind raced for a solution, and I remembered my neighbor, Miss Henderson, a retired police officer who had always told me to come to her if I ever felt in danger. Excusing myself to the bathroom, I sent a quick text to Miss Henderson explaining the situation and asking her for help. Minutes later, there was a knock at my door. It was Miss Henderson, under the patience of borrowing some sugar. Her timely intervention gave me the opening I needed. I thanked Alex for coming and saw him out. Miss Henderson subsidently making her presence known. As he left, she stayed with me, ensuring I was okay and discussing the importance of being cautious with online friendships. The encounter was a wake-up call, a harsh lesson in the reality of online anonymity, and with the potential dangers of trusting virtual acquaintances. I learned to guard my personal information jealously, to question and verify the identities of those who I met online, and most importantly, to never invite someone into my home without thoroughly investigating them first. The incident with Alex showed me the dark side of the digital world I loved, reminding me that not every player behind the avatar holds the same values of friendship and respect as I do. Story 5. I've always thought of myself as a pretty logical person, not really buying into ghost stories or anything spooky. That changed the summer I decided to hang out at my grandparents' big old house in the countryside. It was meant to be a chill time, just me trying to write without city distractions, but man, did things get weird. The house was old and made a lot of noise, which I figured was normal at first, but then weird stuff started happening that I couldn't just stuff out. Things like my stuff moving around by itself, doors closing on their own and opening on their own, and sometimes I could swear I hear whispering when everything was supposed to be quiet. I tried to joke about it, thinking I was just getting a little crazy from being alone, but one night it got real cold all of a sudden, and I could see my breath. I heard footsteps coming closer and closer, and then the doorknob turned and the door opened, but nobody was there. Scared the heck out of me. I hardly slept that night, and when I did, I had a super creepy dream. The next day, I was mix of scared and curious, so I decided to do some detective work. I found a secret spot in the library with the old journals from my grandfather. Reading those, I found out about the guest they had once, a person who was into some dark, mystical stuff and disappeared in weird ways. My great-grandfather thought this person had brought something strange into the house, some kind of invisible thing that stuck around. Realizing I might not be imagining things, that there could actually be something in the house with me, was super scary. But in a weird way, it was also kind of a relief to think it was all in my head. I decided I had to deal with it. So that night I talked to the house, telling whatever was there that I just wanted to live in peace. I don't know if it was talking to the air or just me coming into terms with the house's past, but things started to get better. The house felt nicer, and it seemed like we had an unspoken deal. That summer showed me that some stuff just can't be explained away. I got used to living with the mystery and learned to respect the unseen and the stories behind it. It was a big lesson in keeping an open mind and realizing there's a lot out there we don't understand.